Today we have Grace Harding from Grace Consulting, Fats Lazaridis from Ocean Basket, and Jules Newton from Avocado Vision. Thanks for joining us. So today we're going to be discussing company culture and why it's particularly important for SMEs, entrepreneurs, franchisees to get company culture right. So let's start with, what is company culture? Can you define it for us, Grace?
Yeah, well, I saw something the other day by a guy called Sumantra Ghoshal, who was the Dean of the University of Management in India, and he described it as the smell of the place, and I loved that. And he said, does your company either smell like downtown Calcutta, where it's hot and sweaty, and what is it like to work in an environment like that? Or is it a beautiful, more relaxed atmosphere? And I love the description of it's the smell of the place, and I think it's about the collective language that happens in a company, and that is culture, but I like the smell part the best.
So there is never a lack of company culture. There is always a company culture. It just depends whether it's bad, good, positive, negative, etc.
Everything's got a culture. Families have a culture. Okay. Restaurants have a culture. It's how the place is, how it feels, I think.
Jules, maybe you can tell us, how can a small business or a medium-sized business, how can they foster a positive, productive, happy company culture?
You know, Jess, I think it's about a conscious approach, and there's also a huge unconscious approach to it. And I think every entrepreneur needs to understand, firstly, why it's important to work carefully on the culture of the organization. You know, you can leave it and let it become whatever it is that it will become. Which is probably a bit of your light side and your dark side as the entrepreneur itself, because often the person who leads the organization sets a cultural tone, whether they're aware of it or not.
So the leader is quite key here.
Leader is critical. And you can either just let it become, or you can think to yourself, let me understand why it's important for me to manage the culture and what is it that I want to achieve with it. And there's really an internal and external piece to it. What do I want to be the compelling value proposition that my customers will experience when they're dealing with my company? And what is the compelling experience that my staff feel when they are working every single day and therefore creating that experience for my customer? But I think the most important thing is that both of those experiences are somehow rooted in the truth of the people that are part of that organization, and what they want to create.
To the people.
Yeah, the leader and the people that leader chooses to work in that organization have got a particular way of being in the world. And if you try to create something that is so far from the essence of who you guys are because you've chosen that industry and that particular service and so on, the disconnect is felt by everybody, and it's almost impossible to sustain. So the beginning part of any company culture is saying, who are we as an organization? What is it that customers will love about who we are? What sets us apart? And how do we keep ourselves connected to that thing?
Fats, at Ocean Basket, describe the company culture there and how you've arrived at that point. Was it a conscious working towards that company culture, or was it something you just sort of developed over the years?
Culture in Ocean Basket's been very, very critical to Ocean Basket since its conception. We've always, from day one, it's been on my focus, is to create good company culture. And just the other day, we took almost like one of the biggest, boldest decisions we've ever done, and built canteens for all the staff, and all the canteens are for free. So what we'll end up doing is we all end up eating together, from picker packers to drivers to financial people.
So the execs sit with the bottom people, and
the entire company sits together between 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock. It all depends on what time you want to go and eat, and you don't know who's sitting next to you. And you create communication, and the driver asks you a question, and everybody's exposed to everybody.
So do you think that makes your company more attractive to outsiders as well? When they come into an Ocean Basket, do they feel that happiness?
And they come in those hours, we take them into the canteen. And in the canteen, our staff are eating lunch, and we're doing business meetings.
What other things do you do besides the canteen example, which is a great example? What else do you do?
As far as culture goes, I'm always in the stores. I go from store to store. I speak to operators. It's about what their needs are, what do they need. in my organization, honesty is the most important thing, and trust. So when we go to stores, I don't go in and hammer the people. We're going to ask them what do they need, what do they require from us.
So again, it's coming down to leadership and who's directing it, so it's top down. Is it important who you recruit as a manager and director? Do you choose people specifically because of where you see the company going in terms of culture?
There's a combination of having to respect who and what people are, and then ensuring that you have almost like the collective programming of minds. But I think people will naturally accept or be repelled by a culture. So I think, for example, if someone had to go work at Virgin, if you didn't like wearing bright red lipstick and being like mad, you'd probably hate working there.
The culture in Ocean Basket, if you're working in a store, is to be loud and occasionally break a plate intentionally and scream a little bit and shout a little bit and create like a homely environment. It's very important for us to create that homely environment. And that is what we try and do. So the problem we face is when there's more than one leader, then whose culture do you accept? Because there can't be more than one culture per organization. It's one culture, and that's the culture we're trying to filter through. So we all try and live one good culture.
So it's one shared vision as well. So Jules, in your experience with companies, have you come across leaders who themselves have a sort of surly disposition, or they're only focused on profit, and then that filters down and then it turns the whole vibe sour and unhappy?
Yeah, completely. And I think it is important to differentiate between the big corporate story and the small business story, because they are very different. In a big corporate organization, you have to almost define, create and communicate a culture and reinforce it, and you do it at scale. Whereas in small businesses, it's much closer. So it's very likely that in small business, everyone in the organization experiences the leader.
So it's almost more critical.
It's absolutely, the leader has to be very aware that their behaviors will be replicated within the business. So they are setting the tone. Or a team of leaders, when you have a couple of partners.
Yes. You can speak to the leader and you can hug the leader.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the leader's not a phone call away. In other words, it's not an instruction.
Yeah.
I can do this to the leader, I can do this to the leader, and then it's different, you see. So when the leader gets out of his office and goes into store level, the franchisee, the staff, it's a total different experience.
I have a crazy example. One of my partners in one of the businesses that we own took up cigar smoking for a while, a couple of years, to the point where that's all he did. He smoked cigars. It was starting to make him sick. It was crazy. And I went in one evening just for Friday evening drinks, and I looked around and everybody was smoking cigars. and it's there, and the car park was also full of Mercedes-Benzes, which is a different story. But when he suddenly, I said to him, have you noticed what's happened? You started, and look at your colleagues. And he suddenly realized what a responsibility he had. It is a bizarre thing, but in all of our behaviors we do that. He stopped, and cigars have disappeared from the business, which means he's got a healthier workforce again.
Look, Jess, culture is the most important thing.
Yeah.
If you don't have culture, you don't have a healthy company.
Yeah.
You need good culture. You need to be able to touch it, feel it, smell it, live it, enjoy it. That's it. It's all about the culture.
Yeah.
And you know what it does inside a small business is that when you've got a culture that holds people together, that they're proud of, it's like the glue. Businesses go through good times and bad, and in good times everybody's on the bus and it's cool. But when you've got a strong culture and you hit a rough patch, which most of us who've run our businesses have had in our past, that's when the guys are together and they're performing, because there is that cohesiveness and that glue and that loyalty and that strength that says there's something that I believe in and it's worth fighting for, and I want to make sure that this thing sees itself into the future.
Just to end off, can I just get one practical tip from each of you on how to develop a great company culture? Grace, we'll start with you.
Okay, so the first thing is you've got to design it. So I really think you have to be deliberate about it, because if it's self-consumed, then it won't be relevant to your customers. And you've got to start with the customer. And then one of the tips is just to make it part of your life. I think the days of having separate events to build culture are long gone. And what is so exciting is that the world of the SME is teaching big business lessons, because an SME that employs anything from 1 to 100 people hasn't got the money to go river rafting for 2 days and sing songs around the fire. And what big business is realizing is that through the meaningful and deliberate expression of language in daily interactions, you build a culture. You don't need to do the extra things. So one of the tips is to be deliberate, to be repetitive, to be consistent, and to always look at people inside their eyes to see if it makes sense.
Fats?
You know, in the old days, when I used to speak to the guys, I always used to say to them that I believe in ocean baskets so badly that if you had to cut me open over here, no blood would come out, little goldfish would run out. So that is the culture in Ocean Basket. It's about what are we going to do, what do we do for our people, and what do we expect our people to do for us. We want to live together. We want to lead together. It's not about instructions. It's about we want to do things together. Us, our people, and our franchisees.
Jules?
I must reinforce what Grace is saying about the deliberate and conscious creation of the culture. And I think one of my deliberate daily practices is to stop and think about what it is that I'm doing today that is reinforcing the culture of our organization. I'm a human being. I've got good times and bad times. I'm going to lose it, and I'm going to be really in control of myself at different times. And I've got to consciously come back to myself and make sure that my core is right, so that I can lead the culture of my organization effectively.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope our viewers have gotten a great idea of what company culture means and why it's so important for your business in the short and the long term. Thank you.